My dear listeners, look at me. Don't look at them. You were not born to be a copy. You were born original, crafted with intent, designed with distinction. The greatest tragedy in life is not death. It is comparison. Dying as someone you were never created to be. Every time you measure your life against someone else's, you insult the Creator's intelligence. He never made you to fit into someone else's mold. You see their highlight reel, but you don't see their behind the scenes. You admire their fruit, but you don't know the root. And while you're busy watching their lane, your own road grows weeds. Purpose doesn't come from imitation, it comes from revelation. And you can't discover yours while your eyes are glued to someone else's journey. Let me tell you something. The mirror is not your enemy. The mirror is your classroom. Because the only person you're in competition with is the version of you who settled yesterday. You are an original, not a copy. That truth alone should shift the way you see your life. You were not mass-produced on a conveyor belt of existence. You were custom-made, intricately designed, and uniquely wired for a purpose that only you can fulfill. The fingerprints of God are on your soul, not just in a poetic sense, but in reality. No one else carries your exact blend of strengths, weaknesses, temperament, perspective, and potential. That makes you irreplaceable, not optional. So why do we try so hard to blend in when we were born to stand out? Why do we waste time measuring our steps by the pace of another man's walk? That's like a lion envying the wings of an eagle. Each is majestic, each is powerful, but neither is built to do what the other does. You'll never soar trying to run like someone else. And you'll never rule your ground trying to fly on wings that weren't made for you. When you compare yourself to others, you voluntarily lower your value. It's like taking a masterpiece and trying to match it with a cheap print. Originality carries weight. It holds a kind of authority because it flows from authenticity. People don't follow copies. They're drawn to what is real, to what is rare. And the most powerful version of you is the one that hasn't been diluted by someone else's definition of success. There's a passage in Scripture that speaks to this with piercing clarity. In Jeremiah 1:5, God says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." That's not poetry, that's identity. It means your worth predates your performance. You were known before you were noticed. And if God knew you before you ever existed in time, then He already designed the lane you're meant to run in. You don't have to borrow someone else's. Let me give you a real-life picture. Imagine two trees. One is an oak, the other is a palm. Both are beautiful. But the oak is growing deep, spreading wide, standing firm. The palm, tall and flexible, weathers storms with ease. Now imagine if the oak got frustrated because it couldn't sway like the palm. Or if the palm felt inferior because it couldn't grow thick like the oak. The absurdity of that picture mirrors what many of us do every day. You're comparing growth that was never meant to look the same. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what am I losing by trying to be someone else? What gifts are going unopened because I'm too distracted by someone else's shine? What call am I delaying because I keep trying to mimic a voice that isn't mine? You will never fulfill your assignment acting like someone else. Purpose requires presence, your presence. You can't show up in life dressed in someone else's identity. It doesn't fit. And eventually, you'll grow tired of wearing what was never yours to carry. That's why comparison exhausts the soul. It turns your life into a performance instead of a journey of discovery. Originality isn't just a creative concept. It's a spiritual responsibility. When you lean into who you truly are, you give others permission to do the same. Your authenticity becomes a mirror for someone else's courage. And that ripple effect can change generations. So the next time you're tempted to scroll through someone else's success story and feel small, remind yourself, what they have doesn't threaten what you carry. What they're doing doesn't disqualify what you're becoming. There's enough room in the world for you to be exactly who you were created to be. Stay focused on your own growth. Comparison blinds you to your purpose. It's not just a distraction, it's a distortion. It takes your eyes off your lane and places them on someone else's path, making it impossible to see where you're going. Purpose is revealed through focus, not imitation. And the moment you start measuring your life by someone else's progress, you begin to lose sight of the unique assignment planted inside of you. Imagine trying to drive a car while staring out the window at another vehicle on the highway. You drift, lose control, and possibly crash. Not because you weren't capable of getting to your destination, but because your attention was misplaced. That's what comparison does. It makes you drift. It turns your journey into a reaction instead of a direction. Instead of asking, what is God calling me to do? You start asking, how do I match what they're doing? But here's the truth. Your calling cannot be compared because it wasn't copied. Your journey has its own timing, its own trials, and its own triumphs. Just because someone else got there faster doesn't mean they're ahead of you. And just because your chapter looks slower doesn't mean your story is less powerful. Have you ever read a book where the most impactful twist came in the middle or near the end? Some lives are written that way on purpose. You don't know what someone else had to go through to be where they are. You don't see the sacrifices, the tears, the hidden battles, or even the silent regrets. You only see the surface. But what if their success cost them peace? What if their popularity drained their purpose? Would you still want their story? Let me make this real. Think of a runner in a race. Now imagine that runner spends half their time glancing sideways to check where the others are. Every glance costs them momentum. Every distraction takes energy. And eventually the race becomes less about reaching the finish line and more about proving they are not behind. You weren't created to run a race of comparison. You were created to finish your course with joy. And here's a question we all need to ask ourselves. What have I missed because I was too busy looking sideways? What doors didn't I walk through? What talents didn't I develop? What vision did I abandon because it didn't look like someone else's? You don't grow where you're not planted. And comparison keeps you unrooted, always shifting, never settled. Let's talk about timing. We live in a generation obsessed with speed, fast success, instant validation, overnight results. But real purpose unfolds in seasons. Farmers don't compare harvests while seeds are still underground. They trust the soil, they nurture the process, and they wait for the right time. Some of you are in seed season, and that's why it looks like nothing's happening. But something is breaking through, just not where others can see it yet. You cannot rush what God is building in you. And you shouldn't envy what He's building in someone else. That's their construction site, not yours. Your tools, your blueprint, your process. They're all tailored to the life you're called to build. And if you keep watching their house, you might neglect the foundation under your own feet. You have to get back to focusing on the purpose that was put in your hands. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself, you free yourself. The moment you stop comparing, you start becoming. There's a version of you on the other side of discipline, commitment, and focus that comparison will never let you meet. Keep your eyes forward. Admiration without understanding leads to frustration. It's easy to look at someone's life from the outside and applaud their success, their platform, their influence. But if you admire what you don't truly understand, you'll end up chasing a life that was never meant for you. And worse, you'll grow bitter when you can't seem to catch it. We live in a world that celebrates the end result, not the process. We see the finished product, the shine, the applause, but we don't see the breaking that came before the breakthrough. We don't see the lonely nights, the unanswered prayers, the private rejections, or the quiet sacrifices. We admire what looks easy, not realizing the cost that came with it. But how can you want someone's crown without being willing to carry their cross? Think about it like this. Imagine walking into a house you've always admired from the street. The lights, the landscaping, the doors, all stunning. But once you step inside, you realize it's been beautifully staged for appearances. The paint is fresh, the furniture perfect, the smell inviting. But behind the walls, the plumbing leaks, the foundation has cracks, the wiring is faulty. You only saw what was meant to be seen. That's how most people live. Publicly polished, privately pressured. And we fall in love with what we don't truly know. Now ask yourself this: what have I been longing for just because it looked good from a distance? Whose life have I admired without asking what it took to get there? Have I fallen in love with their highlight reel while ignoring the grind behind the scenes? When you admire without understanding, you start striving instead of growing. You start performing instead of developing. You chase shadows instead of light. You begin to feel like you're always behind, never enough, never ready, never worthy. Not because you're lacking, but because you're misaligned. You're trying to live someone else's journey instead of walking your own. Think of a musician who plays by ear, filled with soul and emotion, compared to someone who's trained by sheet music. Structured, disciplined, and technical. One isn't better than the other, they're just different expressions. Now imagine the musician trained by ear trying to mimic sheet music, feeling inadequate because they don't fit that mold. That's what happens when you admire a life without knowing the wiring behind it. You start seeing your uniqueness as a weakness. But maybe the way you were built wasn't meant to fit that structure. Maybe it was designed to break a new one. This is where frustration takes root. When you try to force results that weren't meant to grow in your soil, you begin asking, why isn't this working for me? Why can't I get their results? But the question should be, was I ever called to their assignment? You cannot flourish in someone else's garden. You must learn to trust your own season, your own process, and your own rhythm. Success is not about imitation, it's about alignment. You can only succeed at being you, and the moment you begin to admire others with understanding, not envy, not insecurity, but wisdom, you start learning the principles, not just the performance. You start asking deeper questions. What disciplines did they build? What pain did they endure? What values did they protect? Because the real story is never in the spotlight. It's in the shadows where character was forged. It's time to stop admiring without wisdom. Honor others, yes. Learn from them, absolutely. But never trade your identity for their image. Never abandon your process just because their progress looks impressive. You're not late. You're not less. You're not behind. You're simply becoming. Keep your focus on your own becoming. Focus breeds clarity. Distraction breeds confusion. The reason many people feel lost isn't because they lack potential. It's because their attention is scattered. You can't hit a target you don't see. And you can't see it if your eyes are always shifting. When you give your focus to everything, you end up mastering nothing. You become busy, but not effective, active, but not aligned, moving, but not progressing. Distraction is one of the most dangerous enemies of destiny. It doesn't need to destroy your gift, it just needs to divide your gaze. And once your focus is split, your energy follows. Purpose requires your full attention. You can't be effective looking one way while your heart pulls in another. There's no clarity in double-minded living. You can't build a strong life on a scattered foundation. Let's bring it into something practical. Imagine holding a magnifying glass under the sun. If you move it around constantly, the light diffuses. But if you keep it still, focused on one point, the heat becomes powerful enough to burn through. The same principle applies to your life. Focused energy creates fire, but scattered attention leaves you lukewarm, never hot enough to ignite anything meaningful. Now here's a thought-provoking question. What would your life look like if you stopped giving attention to what doesn't matter? What would happen if you reclaimed every hour lost to comparison? Every mental space consumed by other people's opinions, and every moment stolen by things that have nothing to do with your purpose. Distraction is subtle. It rarely shows up as obvious chaos. It shows up as opportunities that aren't yours. Invitations that seem important but don't align. People who mean well but pull you off course. Not everything good is God-sent, and not everything attractive is assigned to you. That's why clarity matters. Because when you're clear, you can say no with confidence. You can walk away from noise and not feel guilty. You can move forward without needing everyone to understand. Clarity is power. When you're clear on your purpose, you stop chasing validation. You stop running after applause. You stop measuring your worth by likes, comments, or who's watching. Your value becomes rooted in your assignment, not in the attention you receive. And from that place, you become unshakable, not perfect, but planted, not immune to pressure, but immune to distraction. Think of a photographer adjusting their lens. The background is full of noise, motion, color, but when they zoom in on the subject, everything else blurs. The subject becomes sharp, defined, and central. That's how your life should be. Focus so clearly on your purpose that the noise around you fades. What's your subject? What's the one thing you were born to do that brings meaning to everything else? If you don't answer that question, others will try to answer it for you. People will assign their priorities to you. Culture will try to define your goals. But when you live by external expectations, you lose internal direction. You drift into confusion because you never stop to ask, what am I really here for? Distraction will cost you more than time. It will cost you peace. It will blur your identity, dilute your passion, and rob you of momentum. And often, it doesn't feel like you're doing something wrong. It just feels like you're busy. But motion without direction is not progress. And noise without clarity is not purpose. So take inventory of your focus. Where's your attention going? Who's shaping your thoughts? What's driving your decisions? Because if it's not rooted in clarity, it's probably leading you toward confusion. Protect your focus like your future depends on it, because it does. Compete only with your former self. The moment you start viewing life as a competition with others, you step out of alignment with purpose and into the trap of performance. You were not created to outdo your neighbor. You were created to outgrow your last limitation. Real growth is personal, not public. Your journey is about becoming the best version of who you were yesterday, not a copy of who someone else is today. Comparison fuels rivalry, but growth fuels mastery. You can't master what you keep comparing. Imagine a runner in training. Each day they time themselves, track their progress, adjust their stride. They're not focused on the runner next to them. They're focused on shaving seconds off their own time. That's how growth works. It's internal, it's disciplined, and it's deeply personal. You have to train your mind to celebrate progress that isn't flashy, but is foundational. Here's the truth most people overlook. If you're always looking around to see who's ahead, you'll never realize how far you've come. Some of you are winning battles today that used to break you. Some of you are walking in clarity that once felt impossible, but because you're measuring yourself against someone else's results, you're blind to your own victory. What have you overcome that you haven't celebrated yet? What prayers have been answered in silence while your focus has been too distracted to notice? The Bible gives us a powerful framework for this mindset in Galatians 6:4, which says, "Let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another." That's the principle. Evaluate yourself based on your own assignment, your own effort, your own growth. The moment you anchor your joy in external achievements, you hand your peace over to things you can't control. Think of a sculptor working on a block of marble. Day after day, they chip away. Tiny, deliberate strokes. From the outside, it looks like nothing's changing, but they're not sculpting for applause, they're sculpting for form. And over time, what was once raw and undefined becomes art. That's what happens when you focus on your former self. You chip away at habits, you carve away fears, you refine your thinking, and slowly, the version of you that was hidden starts to emerge. But here's the danger. If that sculptor stopped mid-process to compare their unfinished work to a gallery masterpiece, they might quit. They might lose the confidence to keep shaping what's still in progress. That's what happens when you measure your becoming against someone else's becoming. You judge your middle against their highlight. You abandon your work because you can't see how beautiful it will be in time. And so you have to ask yourself, am I growing or just performing? Am I trying to be better or just look better than someone else? Because there's a difference. Performance is exhausting. It wears a mask. But growth is patient, it's quiet, consistent, and often unnoticed, but it always produces fruit. Don't chase applause, chase improvement. Your greatest competitor is the version of you who refused to grow. Your true test is not how many people you can impress, but how many old mindsets you can replace. Are you more disciplined than you were last year? Are you more compassionate, more grounded, more focused? That's the scoreboard that matters. Because when this life is over and everything external fades, the question won't be, did you win more than others? It will be, did you become who you were born to be? Stay committed to your own growth. So as you walk away from these words, let this truth settle deep in your heart. You are not in a race against anyone else. Your journey is sacred, your timing is intentional, and your growth is unique. Don't let the noise around you drown out the voice within you. Focus on your lane, refine your character, and measure your progress by who you were yesterday, not by who someone else is today. You are not behind. You are not less. You are becoming. Stay faithful. Stay focused. And most of all, stay true to who you were created to be. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And thank you for choosing growth over comparison. Keep pressing forward. Your best is still unfolding. Good luck. And may purpose always guide your steps.